Welcome to Extracurricular. I'm your co-host, Eddie Geller.
And I am your other co-host, Stephanie Vanos.
You did it perfectly.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you are a first-time listener, please do consider subscribing. You can follow us on Instagram on extracurricular_podcast. If you can hear my voice maybe a little less pep in my step today, this is an incredibly powerful episode and conversation we had today with a man named Daryl Perritt, who came on the podcast to talk about something called the Florida Free Kill Law. And we essentially found out about Daryl and his late son, Cameron, through an incredibly powerful piece from the Orlando Sentinel written by Scott Maxwell. And I had never heard of this law. Steph, had you heard of this before?
I had not, no.
Neither of us had heard of it. And when we read this piece, and we'll tell you about the law in a second, we, reached out to Daryl, the father, to talk about this issue. And we actually just got back from vacation. I think we thought we were going to have this important, powerful conversation with Daryl and be able to have an episode as normal. But, I think this is, like I said, a moving conversation that will make folks, I think, really furious. And, you're going to feel it in your heart for sure. So I usually come loaded with bits, but I don't really have a lot of bits to do today.
No bits today.
No bits today. So we'll get into that in a second, but I want to just set the stage so folks know this is what we're talking about today, this Florida Free Kill Law. And I'm gonna quote momentarily from the Orlando Sentinel from Scott Maxwell's piece, but it is a 30-year-old law passed in 1990 and essentially creates a carve-out for folks if they are the victims of medical malpractice in a hospital, if they die. The law, and I'm quoting now, the law essentially says that even if a provider negligently kills an adult patient, family members can't sue for pain, suffering, and answers unless the dead patient has a spouse or minor children. So if you have a 25-year-old daughter who has yet to marry or have kids, you can't sue. The same goes for your mother and father if their spouse has already passed away. So that's the overview of what we're talking about. Steph, do you have anything to sort of further contextualize?
Yeah, and the damages for negligence, if you look in Florida Statute 768.21, typically, minor children of someone who has died can make a claim for non-economic damages in a lawsuit for negligence. And claims like that could be for lost parental companionship, instruction, guidance, mental pain and suffering. But this statute, 768.21 in Section 8, specifically disallows those types of damages for adult children and parents of adult children. So that's sort of where the basis of the law comes from.
And I know this sounds like a lot of legalese. I mean, I'm sure it makes sense to folks, but you'll really understand it when you hear Daryl's story in a moment. This is essentially, as we understand it, a way for hospitals and doctors to not have to pay up if there is an issue of malpractice in these specific categories. And according to Scott Maxwell's piece, as he puts it, back in 1990, the medical and insurance lobby convinced the legislature, which was run by Democrats at the time, to insert a carve-out in the state's Wrongful Death Act that essentially sets different values on the lives of different humans. So I guess this episode, of course, is about Daryl's story, but it's about what happens in Tallahassee. This law is unique to Florida when special interests get these sorts of carve-outs, and they exist in all different shapes and forms around all different, facets of the law. But Daryl has been a fighter for his son's memory and for his rights to get answers because, when you're suing, of course, yes, you are often suing to get monetary compensation, but in Daryl's case, and a lot of this is not just this is not isolated to just Daryl. There's been many cases of this. This is a way for families to find answers about what happens in the hospital.
Right, because, and Daryl makes a point of saying this, there is a way that they could bring some kind of an action to the Department of Health, but in those actions, you can't depose witnesses, you can't introduce any kind of information that is outside of the medical record that is created by the very doctors and medical practitioners that you would be suing. So it's really not even close to the same thing. And I think the other piece of Daryl's work is that he's just providing a light for other people in his shoes who have, suffered the loss of an adult child or a parent, and kind of giving them a place to share their stories and also to try to prevent this from happening in the future. And so I'm so grateful that in all of his pain, Daryl has been able to bring awareness to this issue and educate Floridians about it.
Really an incredible man. So do listen to our conversation with Daryl. We're going to link to his website, floridafreekill.org, in the show notes. And we'll also link to the Scott Maxwell piece from the Orlando Sentinel that inspired this episode. So without any further ado, we'll go to our conversation with Daryl. Welcome to the podcast, Daryl Perritt. Thank you for joining us, Daryl. We invited you on the podcast because we read about your story and Cameron's story in the Orlando Sentinel, a piece that was in there that really moved us, and wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about what this free kill law is, because I will admit I did not know anything about it. And this has been around since 1990, correct?
Correct.
So we wanted to have you on the podcast to share your story, talk about how you're advocating. So let's just start us off. We'll get into the particulars of the law, but if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your son before we maybe go into the whole thing?
Yeah, I'm Daryl Perritt. Most people in the community of St. Augustine know me as Smokin' D's. I opened Smokin' D's about 20 years ago. I was a single father. I sold my house at the right time, and for the first time had a little bit of cash, and so I bought a brick pit. It was a former fruit stand on the corner, and started Smokin' D's. And we've been extremely successful as a smokehouse that sells meat. Basically, it's just meat for money. We smoke meat, we sell it all day, we sell it out. And we've been selling out every day for about 18, 20 years now. So Cameron was 15 years old when I built the pit and opened it. And, he was in high school. The high school is about 2 miles down the road. And Cameron was a very, he was energy. He was just pure energy.
Did he work at the shop sometimes?
Oh, he decided to work at the shop instead of go to school or go to college and leave town. He was a showman, and he was full of energy. He was extremely handsome, and he loved being in there and basically being on stage, because in our shop there's a pit. You open the doors of the pit, you put the meat down, you cut it, you wrap it, and goes. And he loved to just chat with the customers and tell them about barbecue. And he was on stage, and that's where he loved being, and that's what he wanted to be. And when I first started, he was a junior in high school, and they weren't allowed to leave school, but the seniors could. So we have a thing called Wet Wednesday, where we take any leftover meats that we have that we don't sell out on, and we chop it up and put it in kind of a sloppy joe, and sold it for $5 at the time. Well, Cameron would convince the ladies in the lunchroom to let him out the back door. A senior would pick him up, and they would come to the shop, and he would get 10 Wet Wednesdays, take them back, pass them to the ladies in the lunch line who were in the back door, and the senior who drove him, and then 2 or 3 other friends. And I got a call one day from the vice principal saying, uh, your barbecue is appearing in our lunchroom every Wednesday. Maybe that's not a good idea, but that was the way Cameron was. He was a MacGyver. He was energy. He loved what he did, and so we built a second shop for him about 6 years ago in downtown St. Augustine, and he was running that shop. The two of us basically worked together every day or virtually every day for the past 18 years. So.
Sounds like just a wonderful dude and just a beaming light of a child. And I can only imagine how tough this is. But first of all, thank you for sharing. And yeah, can you tell us a bit what happened to Cameron? What went down? I know he went to the hospital. Yeah.
Cameron had a history of blood clots. And so he had been diagnosed before, and he had been on the medicine that they give him for blood clots. He would go off and on it periodically because it had pretty difficult side effects. It would make his heart race and other things. So, but that was, 7-10 years ago. So he was doing fine. Everything about him was fine. He was going to work, everything. And I got a call from his girlfriend that said he was in the shower throwing up something black, which we now know was mostly blood. And that was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. I rushed to his apartment, picked him up, rushed him to the emergency room, got him in there. He told them, I have a history of blood clots, and he was in agony, and he put his finger right where the pain was coming from. So they ran some tests. They sent us home. We were back immediately. The 6:30 in the following morning, he was in agony again. This time they admitted him, and he had been throwing up black bile again. This time they admitted him to the hospital. I got a call about 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday morning. So this is the third day. And that he was throwing up black bile. I got there, and they were sending him to intensive care. So over what amounts to a 4-day period while being in the hospital, Cameron died on Thursday morning from a blood clot right where he put his finger. He diagnosed what the problem was on Sunday, 4 days earlier, and he died from exactly what he said he had 4 days later. So it's unspeakable difficulty to try and handle this.
Yeah.
It's a pretty dark place for me, pretty dark place for our family. The ability that this law has to deny anybody access as to why, what happened, it's like being thrown in a very, very dark room with no windows and no doors. It's just a black box, and I can't get out of it.
Daryl, I just, words can't articulate how sorry I am for your loss. I mean, just unimaginable. And I'm thank you for talking us through it. And so, yeah, explain to us how we sort of got here about this free kill law, and what happened when you tried to find out what happened to Cameron.
Well, that was exactly the first thing I did. I called a lawyer that had done some work for me before and said, they're telling me Cameron's dying. And he said, get him out of that hospital. You would not believe the stories that we've been told about this hospital. And I was like, it's too late for that. He told me that there would be absolutely nothing I could do to find out about what happened. When his mother asked the surgeon why they waited so long to perform surgery, he said, I don't know. They called me at 2:00 today. Those were the last words the hospital spoke to me, and the hospital has not spoke a single word to me since. Efforts to talk to any other lawyers, because I was not looking for money.
Yeah.
I'm a successful restaurateur. Cameron was successful. I was looking for answers. What happened and why? And there's no way to find that out, and the hospital and the medical industry does not have to tell you anything. They are not legally compelled. So I at first tried filing a small claims court, just $5,000. And it was just to try and get the issue in front of a judge to say that I need to be able to depose the doctors, the nurses, the surgeons, to find out who made what decisions. Were they the proper decisions? I smoke meat for a living. I don't know. All I know is I brought him in on Sunday, and he died on Thursday, and he died from exactly what he said he had. You tell me why. And so their lawyer appeared by Zoom. The judge said, you don't have standing because he wasn't your dependent, because Cameron was free kill, because he had no children and had no wife. The idea that Cameron didn't depend on me and I didn't depend on Cameron is about the most obscene and offensive thing you could say to me.
Yeah.
So the judge threw it out, small claims, couldn't do anything. Free kill, doesn't anything. You can go to the hospital and they can give you your medical records, but unless this is part of the educational thing that people need to understand, that whatever you tell somebody in a hospital or medical facility, if they don't write it in the notes, then it doesn't exist. So I was standing in the room with him telling them 3 times that he had a history of blood clots, but it's not showing up anywhere in his test or his statements or anything on the paperwork. It's almost like, you're having to videotape your interactions with various authorities. Well, apparently in Florida, you need to videotape your interaction with, if you fall into the free kill category, you need to videotape your conversations with a doctor, which can't be good for the healthcare industry. So that's an important part of this, is that I didn't know that I had no rights or he had no rights. I didn't know that I needed to record this. I didn't know that I needed to do any of these things. I was just trying to desperately save my child. And I failed.
Well, the work you are certainly doing now seems like the best you could do to honor his memory and make sure that people don't fall into this. This is, and just to clarify for, the podcast audience, that this is a law, this exception that exists in Florida law to allow for these free kills has been around since 1990. And because of this special category that Cameron fell into, you weren't able to get these answers, still unable. But all right, so this awful tragedy happens, and there are I mentioned this before we started recording. You Google this, you'll find there's many other people who've experienced the same god awful thing. And the legislature, it seems like recently had been attempting to repeal this, but then finally repealed it last year. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, they there's been a lot of people in my shoes for the past 30 years who have been working really, really hard. But unless, like your podcast and the Orlando Sentinel, unless somebody exposes what's going on, nobody knows. And the legislature, listening to the stories each year, I guess, for 30 years, but done nothing. Last year, they finally got it through both the House and the Senate. I had that was my first adventure into the billboard aspect. I would gone to a couple of the committee meetings, and they had been past it, but I noticed that there were certain lawmakers who basically turned their nose up every time somebody was talking about their loved ones, and got on their phone, walked out of the room, ignored the story. And so it was pretty apparent to me. So I ran a billboard in Senator Gail Harrell's district that said Gail Harrell puts profit before people. And that became quite the subject on the House and Senate floor. They all talked about Gail Harrell and how wonderful she is. But bottom line is she voted to extend this bill every single time that it's ever come up for the past 5 years. So why would anybody not want everybody to be treated equally?
Right.
There's only one reason, and that's money.
Absolutely.
Well, and it sounds like this really disproportionately impacts, single people who aren't married, who don't have children, or, so often, younger people and also older people who are widowed or have, adult children. And so I think it's that piece of it that is really disturbing, that it's almost as if the legislature and I guess the governor have really chosen, which people are worth more money, or which deaths are worth more pain and suffering than others, right?
Right. Which one's worth saving, which one's not?
Right.
That's and you certainly you don't want to be in my position, but it would certainly be nice to know how these decisions are made.
Yeah.
But this law prevents anybody from finding out who did what, when, and why. That's all. I mean, it would be an improvement in our healthcare system if we could find that out. You would think. But yes, the legislature did pass it, and it was a great day for all of us that had been advocating and fighting for it. Some gave me a little bit of credit for spending the money on the billboard. I spent the money on the billboard for Gail Harrell. After it passed, I spent another probably $10,000, $15,000 on billboards in Tallahassee, saying, I had Cameron's picture on it, and it said, "Why am I dead?" And I had Governor DeSantis, don't put profit before people. Don't veto the bill. And then in May, he vetoed the bill. So, against 93% of the other lawmakers. I mean, that should tell you right there exactly who's. I mean, if the blue team and the red team, 93% of them agree on something, that's a pretty extraordinary number.
Yeah.
And so there's absolutely no reason for him to have not abided by this. The other thing that I at last week's committee meeting that I mentioned, nobody who has been there speaking about changing this law ever knew the law existed until their loved one was dead. And as you mentioned, you didn't know about the law.
Right.
right? So what does that tell you? That tells you that the victims haven't had a voice for 30 years. The victims haven't had a voice. They've been coming up there and doing that because, there's good barbecuers, there's bad barbecuers, there's good podcasts, there's bad podcasts, there's good doctors, there's bad doctors, there's good lawyers, there's good and bad in everything. But there's no way to find out in Florida who's bad. I still don't know any of the records of any of the people that were involved with my son's diagnosis. I have no ability to find out. Was there any violations? Was there any, did this person just come in from Sweden? I don't know. I have no background. I have no ability to find out about the people who made decisions about my son's life.
Right. I had read somewhere that there was that through the Department of Health, there's some kind of investigation that can be done. Did you go down that avenue at all?
Yeah, and that's where I say they can only use what paperwork was produced by the hospital. So that's like, that's like the farmer asking the fox how the hens are.
Okay.
You can't, I filed the claim. They called me 60 days later and said, the case is closed. There was nothing wrong. I mean,
okay.
Who closed it? What happened? Right. What did they say? Who did you talk to? Zero. Okay. Zero information from the Florida Department of Health. I read right after Cameron passed, I read a front page article in our St. Augustine Record. 2-inch headline. Into the abyss was the 2-inch headline. When information goes into the Florida Department of Health, it disappears and you'll never find it. You'll never find out about any doctor, any nurse, any hospital, any health problems, anybody that's died. You cannot. It's run by the medical industry.
Right. And so that's the piece of why, being able to file a lawsuit is important, because that's how you can get to, let's say, interviewing the nurses or interviewing the people you talked, having depositions with those people, getting access to those records. So that's sort of, so you're saying, so I was just unclear of where that point came from before, but it has to be in the record if you go through that Department of Health inquiry. Nothing can come outside of that. Yeah.
They go to look at whatever they look at, but they're run by doctors, financed by doctors. The whole thing is and it's in a black box that I don't get to be part of or listen to or see. Yeah. It's that clarity and sunlight is where the truth will be revealed. Right. And there's an active program to prevent people from knowing and seeing what's really going on. That's all. And because the healthcare providers in general are doing a great job, but you do have instances where people make mistakes. And this is what you need to find out. Because there isn't an uproar over the last 30 years tells you that the majority of the hospitals and doctors are doing a good job, doing the best they can. But the idea that, but when there's a problem or there's a mistake, you have no recourse, that doesn't happen in any other part of the world, if you're a bad politician, you don't get reelected. If you're a bad barbecuer, you don't get customers. Right. If you're a bad podcast, you don't have anybody viewing it. Right. But if you're a bad doctor, nobody will ever know. Right. In the state of Florida. Right. So the question that many of the Florida Medical Rights Association are pushing is like, they're claiming that this will drive doctors away, but what it really does is bring the worst doctors to Florida. Because if you were not up to your game or you had a problem in North Carolina or Georgia, what would you do? Go to the state where they can't find out anything.
Right.
So it's drawing
No, that's a good
incompetent.
point. Well, and I think, I also read through statistics from the Department of Health. I think they did a survey in 2022 that showed that it was not a reason that doctors were leaving Florida because of liability questions or because of, medical malpractice lawsuits. It was a very small percentage. So, the reason that is given is just not really believable.
It's BS.
Right.
It's about money. They're blaming it on anything they can. They created this 30 years ago, and they sold it that way. But there's been more doctors in the state of Florida each year for the past 30 years. So we're not losing doctors.
Right.
If
And,
we've had an increase in the number of doctors every year, this
right.
it's not BS. So I just want equality, fairness. And the reason nobody thinks that this law exists is because we all pledge allegiance, liberty and justice for all. We had no idea that there was an exception for that last line inside a Florida medical facility.
Right.
I mean, we were shocked. You said you didn't know about it. My 82-year-old widowed mother-in-law, we moved her from Jersey 10 years ago. She's been a widow for 25 years or more. She lost her rights inside a Florida medical facility when she crossed the state line. Nobody told us, and I try to invite people, go talk to your own family. Apply this law to your own family, to your own friends and your own jobs, and find out how many people this really affects. I contacted a research firm in Jacksonville who said back of the envelope, minimum 2 million people in the state of Florida do not have rights inside a Florida medical facility. 2 million.
Yeah. So DeSantis has, vetoed the bill that would have rectified this. Where do we stand now, Daryl?
When he vetoed it, I started End Free Kill Now, which is a super PAC, which can take donations, and it's collecting names, email addresses from people who read the story, who read your podcast, who can come and help educate themselves. The website is totally designed to educate everybody about the dangers that they may have inside a Florida medical facility. So it has a little questionnaire that says, are you married? Do you have children? And it tells you if you're free kill or you're not free kill. So that's what I'm doing, is trying to educate the 2 million minimum people who are in the state of Florida right now, because it's just not citizens. Today, I got an email from a woman in Texas who said, I read your story. I have 2 boys, neither of them married, neither of them have kids. They probably will be vacationing in Florida. Does the free kill law apply to them? And I sent her back and said, yes, it does. Doesn't matter if you're from England or Germany, or you come into Florida and go get on one of those cruises, and you're from Ohio. Well, guess what? If you're a widow or a widower, you're likely free kill. You have absolutely no rights. And so that's why I put the billboard on I-95 that says, welcome to the free kill state of Florida. And so my goal is to keep that billboard up, to raise enough money to have another one erected on I-75. Welcome to the free kill state of Florida. And if they do not end free kill this session, then I want to activate all of the people that have signed up and emailed me and that want to participate, and let them know which lawmakers voted to end free kill and which lawmakers did not vote to end free kill. If I can't hold the hospital accountable, I'm going to hold those lawmakers who do not support liberty and justice for all, then I'm going to hold them. They shouldn't be there. If you don't believe in the Pledge of Allegiance, you shouldn't be a lawmaker in the state of Florida. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's anybody who votes to keep this law doesn't believe in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for what you're doing, because I know, coming from the circumstances that you came from and losing your son in such a horrible way, it just takes a lot. And so for you to come kind of back from that and try to protect and just make aware, not just the 2 million people, I think, in Florida who might fall into that category of like free kill, but there's so many more people who are impacted if they were to go into a hospital and not receive the treatment that they needed. So it's not just, it's the lives of the 2 million people, but it's also the lives of the millions and millions of people who care about them. And so thank you for doing that. And and thank you for trying to activate and educate. I think it's the only way. And I appreciate especially these billboards and just trying to put pressure on lawmakers to get, to repeal this law. So thank you for doing that.
Well,
I admire you.
It's not a job I want.
Right.
I know.
I don't want this job.
I know.
No one would.
But I can't. I can't not.
Well, it is floridafreekill.org. We'll post a link to it. I encourage anyone who's listening to check out the website. Support if you can. Daryl, thank you so much. I know both Steph and I are moved by your presence, and hopefully we can do part in helping your campaign. And
well, it's going to be paying attention to the lawmakers and which ones of them are, working for the insurance industry and which ones are working for the people. And when they see how they voted, getting on the phone and calling them. The representative from, it was so surprising, I can't think of his name right now. I should have had my list, but he's in the villages. He's a lawmaker in the villages who voted to keep free kill. Now, I wonder what would happen if all of his widows and widowers in the villages realized that they do not have the same rights as the other neighbor whose husband's still alive or whose wife's still alive. I mean, the idea that in the state of Florida, when your spouse dies, you lose all your rights. Yeah. We have an advocate in Jacksonville. She lost her daughter in Orlando, rear-ended, misdiagnosed brain bleeding on the brain in the emergency room 3 separate times. She passed away. She's a hard single mother, raised 2 girls. One of them passed away. When her second daughter turns 25 this year, the daughter and the mother lose their rights inside a Florida medical facility. It's just such a weird, makes no sense law. The only way it makes sense is it makes sense, financial sense, for the hospitals and the insurance industry.
And like you said, just the power that they must have, because in the other sections of the wrongful death statute, there is not this exception for, right? So there's not an exception if your 28-year-old son or daughter were to get in a car crash or, have something else. There's not this exception that there is just in medical malpractice. So it really is unjust and really makes no sense and is so unfair to these families and to these victims.
Well, think about a person who lives in Florida. At 24, you have rights. At 25, you don't. You get married, you have rights. You get divorced, you don't have rights. You have a child, you have rights. The child reaches 25, you don't have rights. You're still married, you have rights. Your husband dies, you lose your rights. That's one person in and out of the free kill category. If something tragic happens at one of those times, you're done. You got zero. Nope. Not your mother, not your father, not somebody like me and Cameron who touched on. We said I loved you and hugged our necks every single day for 18 years. Don't tell me I didn't depend on him. Don't tell me he didn't depend on me. You know, the weakest of our society, severely autistic and Down syndrome people, rarely grow up and have kids and family. But they do grow up, and at the age of 25, they lose all rights inside a medical facility, and their mother or father have no ability to protect them. So now you're talking about somebody who, may have, a 2-year-old's brain, a 10-year-old's brain, who has one person or two people that they trust immensely, their mother and their father, who's been caring for them for 25 years, and suddenly go into the hospital and that person doesn't have any rights?
It's absolutely unconscionable.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank the two of you for reaching out to me and helping me with the story, and for all of your audience reaching out, understanding that sometimes tragedy comes hunting you, and you don't want to be in its way, but I believe that we can change it this year. I think with enough pressure on lawmakers, when they realize that this story is catching fire with your podcast, the various stories that have been written. There's been about 7 of the 6 o'clock news channels that have done stories on it. What's happening is more and more people who have become victims over the last 30 years are coming out because they had no place to go.
Right.
If they didn't find Florida Medical Rights Association, or they they were like me in a dark hole going, what the hell are you talking about? And the lawyers couldn't help you. The doctors weren't going to help you. You had no resources for anybody. And so now they're coming out. I got a call the other day. He is a fireman. His brother was a fireman. I think it was in Fort Pierce. His brother died of free kill. DeSantis sent him the flag that he flew at half-mast for his brother, the first responder who passed away. And then, then he vetoed the bill that would have enabled his brother to find out what happened. So you want to talk about talking out both sides of your mouth, and
that's it right there.
Politics, right there it is.
Exactly.
So people like him have contacted me, and I'm going to be bringing him to Tallahassee for him to tell his story, because it's not just me and Cameron.
Absolutely.
There's
not.
people all over that this has been happening to, but they had no voice. So thank you both for giving a voice to us, because our family doesn't have a voice anymore, and we have to find a way to speak for them, and that's what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Daryl, and anything we can be doing, we're proud to do it.
I heard a thing the other day that when elephants fight, it's the grass that gets trampled, and it's the personal injury lawyers against the hospital and insurances, and Cameron got trampled. I got trampled. But I told the lawmaker, I said, yeah, but the grass is catching on fire and somebody's going to get burned. So that's my goal, is to light the grass on fire.
Well, we're right beside you, so thank you for being the leader and helping other people find their voice and finding a way to share their story, because there is, I think, something about sharing their story and their experience that is also helpful in its own way too.
This is therapy for me.
Yeah.
As much as nothing else is going to help.
Yeah.
This isn't going to help me either, but it is other people who've reached out to the Florida Medical Rights Association, and that I've talked to, the fireman. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with him explaining this law to him, because he was in shock.
Yeah.
That he was just in shock. He said, my brother was as patriotic, as caring and loving and serving. He joined the fire department. He's on the fire department, because he followed in his brother's footsteps.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there, so he needed somebody to talk to. And so I've been that person, I guess, for some people. And they were there for me too. So thank you both very much.
Yeah. It's the only reason it's hard for me to articulate words. It's like it's terrible and powerful, and you are a great voice for Cameron's memory, and so I think our listeners will be moved as well.
Thank you. I hope so.